Kevin Mann, who is from Permission to Play, and you call yourself, I notice, a creativity fan and marketing strategist. So,
Yeah.
in terms of a creativity fan, what is a creativity fan?
Well, it's someone who's really passionate about creativity and loves creativity in every part of life. That's really what it's about. To me, I think creativity is what makes a lot of us tick. Certainly makes business tick, and that's why I think the reason I call myself a creativity fan is just to get across that actually there isn't enough creativity out there, and we need a lot more people who champion creativity in all walks of life.
Yeah.
Whether it's designing cities or producing artworks, it doesn't really matter what it is, or dealing with crises like COVID or anything else like that. Creativity actually is an important part of that. So that's all it is, just saying yay for creativity.
Yes, yeah, no, I'm right there with you, right there with you. I mean, and my whole thing is that people don't really appreciate the creative industries, and that how much creativity is a part of who we are, just in our everyday lives. So Kevin, can you tell us a little bit? I mean, obviously we met through our work with Heart, which is the art therapy charity based here in Hampshire. You volunteering and me working with them on their sort of partnership side of things. And we kind of came together because of the Permission to Play thing. I was quite gobsmacked when we started a conversation and you told me about your website, Permission to Play, and I was like, well, that's exactly what I do in my drama classes with my adults. It's I give them permission to play. That's why they come. They come to me, and we do what we do. So tell us a little bit about Permission to Play and how it came about, and your kind of journey to get there.
Yeah, well, I mean, my background is in marketing, particularly marketing in financial services with some of the large banks and other outsourcing companies and things like that, particularly as an interim director. So I'd come in as an interim marketing director to large organizations that were going through a lot of change. Either they were merging with other organizations, or they were having to change the way they were behaving because their markets were changing faster than they were changing. So I would come in and help them to adapt to those new circumstances and try to get them to come up with new strategies and certainly new answers to the problems that their customers were asking them to solve. And one of the biggest frustrations that I found in going through all of these different and quite a few different organizations was that a lot of people tried to just do what they'd always done. So there was a reticence to actually be creative, inventive, be adaptable. And that's really where Permission to Play came from, is because I spent most of my time in these organizations actually helping them to be creative. I didn't need to find the answers to what their customers wanted. They needed to find those answers. And it was just giving them I suppose really the courage and the confidence to be creative themselves, to innovate, to try things, to test things, and really to also listen to their customers and see what different views were coming out from there. So that's where Permission to Play came from. It really took a lot of the activities that I was doing in that type of role and packaged it into, I suppose, an innovation program. So what I produced is a 12-week innovation program that takes people through a whole innovation cycle from really just understanding what problems are out there that potentially they want to solve, and then takes them through how to understand those slightly better, how to take different perspectives on them, and then how to come up with different ideas on different ways of solving those problems. And we take them through associative thinking, and then also look at some scientific approaches, and then to create prototypes for some of their answers on there. And eventually what they do, and these tend to be teams of 30 or 40 people split into teams of 5 or 6. And at the end of it, they come together to pitch their ideas to an innovation panel, which is comprised of executives from the company, but also some specialists from outside. And they pitch their ideas to those panels for a winning idea. And then the executives tend to give them, the board there tends to give them a prize for the winning solution. Now, there could be solutions that they might want to implement within the organization, but actually the important thing is about giving people the chance and the time to play, to practice, creative thinking, and to try different things. And it's just saying to them, look, here's some free time for you to do that. You can do it over 12 weeks. it takes, certainly an amount of commitment each week by the individuals, but it's only a few hours a week, so it's not overly onerous, and it really gives them a chance to open up and come out with some brilliant ideas and potential new developments and innovations that they could take forward.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say we did one session together that I was part of with Civica, and I was gobsmacked actually at how playful the participants were, considering obviously they were software designers. They didn't have they had no desire to do what I was asking them to do, I don't think, but it seemed that they actually really enjoyed it. I mean, were there light bulb moments for some of those people going through that process?
Oh, absolutely. And for a lot of them, it was quite surprising how very simple things were the things that were the light bulb moments that showed them that actually there's very simple things they can do to be a lot more inventive in the way they tackle things. I mean, part of the days that you were involved in, that was at the very beginning of the 12-week session that they did. And that was specifically about getting them to really release some of their inhibitions and to actually say, look, you can just let loose and do stuff, and it's fine. It will just be funny if it isn't right. That doesn't really matter. So I think, and that worked really well. That sort of role-playing activity that you were doing really worked well to help them to lose some of those inhibitions.
Yeah, and quite often I think it is the fact that people don't give themselves permission. They kind of get to a point in their lives where they think, well, I'm an adult now, I'm a grown-up, so I can't play anymore. And actually, just in the process of playing gives people the space to be creative. And I don't think people kind of make that connection necessarily. They, as you say, they have to be given permission to do it. Otherwise, they don't bother. We watch children play all the time, and we give them permission to play. But as adults, that seems to disappear. So in terms of your own creativity, because it seems to me, and I saw somewhere that you'd written that you wanted to be an artist growing up, and you still do, and it feels like you don't think of yourself as creative in that way. So is there a difference between being a creative and being an artist, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, an artist is creative, but it's only one element of creativity. To me, actually, creativity, an artist is creative, but so is a scientist, so is an inventor, so is an accountant in many ways. So creativity isn't really just about the arts, although that's a critical part. So do I think of myself as creative? Yeah, I absolutely do. Think I'm creative, and we can probably talk about what I think creativity is and how it works and those sort of things in a bit. But for me, the reason I don't consider myself an artist is simply because art was something I wanted to do. And when I came to the UK, I tried to get into art college, but because I'd studied mainly maths and science, and the school I was in just didn't do art, they wouldn't let me into art college. And so from there, I went down more of a business route of marketing and other things like that. Mainly because marketing was a creative sector, if you like. I could spend other people's money to do creative things, which to me sounded wonderful, and it has been great. But it was that thing that I couldn't get into art college, so I couldn't study art. And I've always wanted to. I do a lot of photography, and I used to do a lot of drawing and things like that. But through my career, I've never had the opportunity to actually to do art in a more commercial, art as a fine art, if you like, in a commercial way. So that's really why I don't consider myself an artist, and would still love to do that. I mean, if you told me that tomorrow you could give everything up and just paint or draw for a living, I would do that. But I don't think I'm there yet, and I probably need to learn how to paint and draw first. So.
Well, just give yourself permission.
Exactly.
Exactly. So going back to that then, what is your definition of creativity? How would you define creativity?
Well, for me, creativity is just applying imagination to creating something or to producing something. So that something could be a piece of art, but it could be a new invention, or it could be solving a problem. How to get rid of the plastic in the oceans, those sort of things. So it doesn't have to be related to the creative industries as general, or the arts in general. It's just about using that imagination in a very practical way. I mean, certainly I suppose the definitions that psychologists and others use for creativity is producing something that's new, that's novel, that's something that's unique, but is also useful. That's one of the definitions that comes up is, creativity is about producing something new, but also useful for the world. And to me, I think that's probably where I see it as that fits with my view of creativity, and therefore marketing is creative, business is creative, and innovation, product design is creative, marketing campaigns are creative, and designing cities, designing streets, designing railways, anything else like that can really use creativity to get the best results for the world and for anyone using it.
Yeah. You mentioned there the problem solving side of creativity.
Yeah.
So it made me think of the fact that you traveled halfway across Mongolia without a map.
Yeah.
And to me that seems quite a creative way of doing.
Well, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't intentional. I'd lent my map to someone else and then forgotten to get it back, and we'd gone in different directions, so I had to carry on. I wasn't quite sure exactly where. I mean, Mongolia is fairly big. Yes. I wasn't exactly sure where they'd got to, so I carried on. I knew there were mainly two. There were two main routes. From where I was in Western Mongolia, trying to get to Ulaanbaatar in the center, more or less. There was a northern route which was quite difficult, and a southern route, just sort of skirting the top of the Gobi Desert, that was a bit easier. So I just did that one, and yeah, I mean, from time to time you'd stop and ask people, and just all you need to say is Ulaanbaatar and ask a direction. They would generally point, and of course there's no roads, so you would have to try to say, look, yeah, is there a path or anything? But it's surprising how easy you can, particularly in spaces like that, how easy you can pick up on things that help you to guide yourself around. Yeah. Certainly the stars. I know where the North Star is, so I could certainly use that to some extent at night. So that would give me a view of where I needed to set off in the morning. But also, there's very few cities or towns, but what connects them is the electricity pylons. So as long as you follow the pylons, then you're going to the next town.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of the lifesavers, was just following the pylons, as long as you could see them in a distance, because you couldn't always follow them very closely, but you could, if they went over a mountain range or a ridge or something like that, you would have to skirt around. So in the end, I got there. Luckily, I met up with some other people who were more or less doing the same journey as me just before I got into the city. Into Ulaanbaatar, and they had a map of where they were going in the city, because I didn't have that either. So, and that was that was great, because I would never have found my way around the city in that respect.
So I suppose is it more creative trying to get back? I mean, it's okay when you're kind of going somewhere that you've never been before, but then to find your way home must be more.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was my end destination, but I mean, and so I just flew back from there. I left the car in Ulaanbaatar, donated it to charity, and flew back. But actually, getting lost is one of the, I think one of my favorite things to do. I just love getting lost anywhere, just to explore places. And I mean, I'll quite often do trips to various countries, and I love spending a few days where you just go off and take a path and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
You're never going to get too far from anything serious, or you certainly make sure you don't get too far from anything, from civilization or access to, to water and food and things like that, and shelter. But, it's a great thing to do. And even in, major cities, I worked in Zurich for quite a few years, and I would, quite often just go and just wander around aimlessly to see what the city was like, particularly parts of the old city and things like that. I had no idea where I was going, no idea what I was looking at, but it's a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I did hear a story that only yesterday of a woman that had gone for a hike, left her car, left her phone, gone for a hike, and got herself lost. And 17 days later, she was found. She'd fallen down a cliff. She'd broken her leg. She literally had to survive for 17 days. And she came out and she said at one point she just kind of said, right, I want to open my eyes again. She sat there and closed her eyes. I want to open my eyes. And when I open my eyes, I want the fear to be gone. And so she kind of preyed on that, I suppose. And when she opened her eyes, the fear had gone and kind of intuition had taken over. So she had decided not to be frightened of what was happening, but just to be as intuitive as she could. Is that something, I mean, is that intuition something that you've maybe brought into your sort of your life now that might have stemmed from being lost or getting lost?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was never quite lost in that serious way. So I always try to have a bit of safety net there. But absolutely, like you do follow your intuition, and quite often it's absolutely right. You'd be surprised at how easily you do get things right when you are just going by, by your gut, effectively, by your instinct. And a lot of it is just hardwired, I suppose, in there, and you've probably picked it up from a life of experiences and things like that. So um, directions or things you can try, what you're capable of doing, and as long as you focus on those and keep positive, you generally get through it. So absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. And before we leave the subject of getting lost in strange countries, I'm really intrigued by this language that you made up when you were at school, and how that worked, why it worked, and I mean, how creative is that to actually create your own language?
Well, language is actually one of the things that's quite amazing, and the number of languages that are out there in the world and continuously evolving and changing, they're one of the demonstrations really of how creative people are. The language, actually, it's just, we were at a French school in Italy, in Rome, and all it was a pidgin French, effectively, between French and Italian, which all the students spoke, because they were all fluent French, fluent Italian, and they just naturally merged the two languages together. So you would have predominantly French with Italian words franchised, or whatever the word is, to the language. And it's quite amazing that they all spoke that. In fact, one of the teachers started a dictionary of the language, which is called Chateaubriandais. That the school was Lycée Chateaubriand, and so they just used that. And I still speak it with friends from school and my brother and others like that. So
that's amazing.
And that's where a lot of the pidgin English, pidgin French, that's where all of those things come from. It's where languages are forced and merged together. I think there was a book or something here in the UK, probably back in the 80s or something, called Franglais, where they mixed English and French together. So it's nothing different, nothing different from that. But it's amazing how, you can, borrowing words from different languages, you can actually really embellish what you're saying and how you're talking, and it gives a lot more meaning to things. And in fact, within the family, rather than just the school itself, we also borrow words from Swahili and other things like that, because that's I grew up in East Africa as well. So you'll embellish things and bring things in, and that's true of English language. I mean, the English language is probably one of the ones that has been one of the greatest mixtures of some of the European languages. To be honest with you, it is a whole mixture of several different origins. So
I grew up in North London, and there was quite a big Greek community, and so I went to school with a lot of Greek kids, and worked in the fashion business, which was very Greek orientated, and I used to love listening to them, because they'd speak half Greek and half English, and it was like it was a whole other language. It was really intriguing. Brilliant. Excellent. Obviously, going back to where we met at Heart, and I mean, they do fantastic creative work and using art as therapy. I mean, how do you bring that? How did you end up wanting to volunteer for an arts therapy charity, and how do you think it benefits that sort of creativity and well-being and mental health? How do those two meld together for you?
For me, I mean, just the fact it was something related to art, and I have this background of wanting to be an artist, so I thought it would have an opportunity to mix with people who were arty, if you like. So there was an element of that. I could probably learn some things that I would love to learn without being able to go to study art or anything else like that at the moment. But in an environment that I thought would be fairly relaxed, where you're just doing things together. So from that respect, that was great. But also, one of my cousins is an art therapist in Ireland, and she was always banging on about how great it is, for people. So I thought it'd be great to see what she was talking about and see it in action, and see how how it did help people who were going through either stressful times or other issues, or really just needed some avenues to express themselves.
Yeah.
So that's really where it came from.
Yeah. And how have you seen that in action? I mean, I know obviously you volunteered for some of the groups.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed it. Because it's regular people who tend to come to them, you do start building a sense of, sense of community, a group there. And it is one where people can actually start revealing some of their feelings and start talking about some sensitive issues and some key issues, but doing it through the art actually just gives that a little bit more protection, security, and a guided way in which they can do that. So and quite often they'll do individual activities, and sometimes they'll do similar activities but as a group, and that, I find that's a very therapeutic way of thinking about these issues, talking about these issues. A lot of them positive, some of them negative, and it's just a way of airing those. And it's great seeing people try new things as well. So quite often we'll try, do some clay work, or do some, whether it is drawing or painting, there's a whole variety of activities, art activities that take place. And it's just great seeing that little discoveries that people are making. Oh, I thought you can use that in that way, or you can do this. So yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating. It's been great fun.
Yeah. And so during obviously the lockdown and isolation, how have you been creative?
Creative.
What have you done?
Well, I must admit, I was part of me was quite happy with the lockdown, because I was actually on the finals of some studying I was doing. I was doing a university course, and it was my finals coming up to end of May, early June. So I was quite happy to just lock myself away and focus on that. It was a bit of an issue because my final project was based on looking at greening of cities, in particular looking at how trees are incorporated into the design of new house building and cities and things like that. So I was due to do quite a lot of field work, which of course I couldn't do. So I had to find creative ways of doing the field work to support the project and the research that I was doing for the project. And that was great fun, is actually trying to find different ways. And it's amazing what you can do now with the technology that's out there. I mean, using Google Street View to be able to do some research on the quantity and types of trees that are in different types of locations and things like that, and using online theodolites to measure them and various other things. It was quite amazing what could be done. So I was creative in that way, more studying and applying myself to things. I did actually do a bit of I do a bit of photography when I can on the side, and some of the stuff I was doing was more about actually filming insects and things like that in the garden, and birds and whatever else, but most of it was studying.
Yeah.
That was the creativity.
Yes, no, and it is, and I have to say, in isolation myself, it's been a fantastic time for learning. I mean, it just has, and doing everything online and having literally, Google at your fingertips to just be able to bring up all sorts of stuff. It really has been enlightening. I've met so many more new people online, sort of through networking and through sort of learning platforms. It's been incredible. And I even learnt in lockdown that so many other artists and creative people and so many creative innovations have come out of previous lockdowns, like the Black Death and the Renaissance. If it hadn't been for the plague that ravaged Europe back in the 14th, 15th, 14th century, then there wouldn't necessarily have been a Renaissance. Shakespeare spent most of his adult life in isolation in one way or another, with the theatres locking down, and he did some amazing writing. Isaac Newton did calculus. He was sent home from Cambridge University when all that closed down because of the plague, and yeah, he came up with his ideas around gravity, sat in his back garden because he couldn't go anywhere. So yeah, how do you feel about that sort of kind of innovation that comes from a pandemic, or a process that we've been through?
Yeah, and it's certainly, creativity quite often comes from something that jerks our mind into a different direction, or gives us limitations that force us to think, and certainly then expand the imagination. That's one of the key things. And so pandemics do both those things. They give us a real jerk, if you like, to our lives and our thinking. But also they again give us the limits that can help us to focus our thinking in one or two very clear directions, very straightforward directions. So I think that's really where a lot of this, that's why crisis quite often, apart from the need to find solutions to things, but just the fact of this, life has changed, there's something different. That's what creates the spark and the impetus to really push your imagination to then come up with some of these things.
And I think that need for solutions is another big thing, isn't it? Certainly for innovation, whether it's science or just finding other ways of doing things. I mean, I certainly remember having a conversation with you when I first started my business a couple of years ago about doing what I do online, and thinking I couldn't possibly do that. How could I teach drama online? And here I am, 18 months later, having to do it and doing it, and enjoying it. So
and you've done some brilliant plays online, ones I've seen. So that's worked really well.
No, it's been great. I mean, I know you kayak and you're quite out on the seawall and sort of on your bike and doing different things. Is that a way that you kind of give yourself headspace? Do you find that you get creative if you're out doing that sort of activity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, particularly the kayaking, because quite often, I mean, I'll go out throughout the whole year, including if it's freezing temperatures and things like that. And here, where we're on the coast, we're in a beautiful location where we've got some wonderful wildlife, particularly in the winter. There's all of the migratory birds and things like that because of the salt marshes off on the Solent, so around Key Haven and those areas, and Lymington to some extent. And just being out there quite often, quietly amongst all the birds, you'll occasionally get a seal pop its head up, and it's a wonderful place to actually just be mindful and still and just take it all in. And for me, it certainly is a great place to de-stress, take away a lot of the worries, and just focus on very simple things. And quite often it's a good opportunity to then start thinking about one thing or another. Just let your mind wander and go off in different directions. Absolutely,
yeah, brilliant. So obviously you are still doing the Permission to Play, and that's kind of online now, and you've got the website. So what's new for Permission to Play? What's coming up for you?
Well, the main thing, I mean, Permission to Play has mainly been face to face, so we've tended to lead these teams in the offices and various premises and things like that. So we can certainly do that online, and we've done some of it just online, particularly through Zoom or anything else like that, where we'll lead the teams through a virtual classroom, if you like, and get them to work together on their innovations. But the next thing we really wanted to try to do is to produce something where people can just follow in their own speed. So just create an online program where people can go in and create their own program and dip in as they want and take themselves through that innovation program over I suppose 12 sessions, if you like. I mean, you can do it over 12 weeks. You can do it a bit faster if you like, but the 12 weeks allows you the time for ideas to really coalesce and form and change and do things like that. So hopefully in the autumn we'll have a self-guided, if you like, program for people to follow. On top of that, then on the website, I mean, we're permanently creating articles, ideas, thoughts on how, what things, tips that can help people be more creative. Obviously, for Permission to Play, it's about creativity in the workplace, if you like. So it is for businesses and not-for-profits in developing their answers to whatever their market is asking them to do. So it's all about that type of creativity. And we do have a free creativity playbook, if you like, which includes about 30 of the techniques that we certainly use on a regular basis on all of the workshops and training that we take people through, which is free to download. Anyone can download that. But otherwise, there's great articles on the website that we add from time to time that gives you tips and ideas on how to take innovation forward, really.
Yeah. I mean, I've got one in my head about the doodle bird. Can you just explain what that is? Because that's a very quick creative prompt, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. And I mean, all that is to show people that anyone can be creative. It's one of those things, people will say, a lot of the time that they can't draw, and we do ask people to think by, do some thinking by drawing and, scribbling, or, try to think visually, if you like, and also creating prototypes. And immediately people say, well, I can't draw, I can't do anything like that. So to prove it to them, then we do this exercise called squiggle birds. And all you do is, sorry, all you do is just do a few random squiggles on a page, about 6 to 9 circular squiggles on the page. And then we just show you how you can turn each one into a bird, and each bird will be completely different. And all you do is add a beak wherever it looks right, a little dot for an eye. You put a tail on there, and then a couple of lines for feet. And it's amazing how each one of those can turn into quite an amazing bird creation. I mean, you could do birds, because that's the one we tend to do. It's easy, simple for people to do. You could do monsters. How could you turn each squiggle into a monster? A couple of googly eyes, some teeth or some fangs or something, and again, some feet or some hands.
Yeah.
And it just gets people into the mood to say, actually, when you're thinking with your hands, particularly for creativity and innovation, you don't need to be a master draftsman. Stick men are fine. A square for a building is fine.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be perfect. It's about the thinking process, and it just gives people into that creative mindset.
Yeah, and going back to kids, it's that kind of doodling and just drawing what's in your head. Just get it out on the paper. It's not about what it looks like. It's about as you say, it's about that process. So do you think everybody's born creative? Do you think it's something that we all have when we're born?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think creativity is a muscle. So we're certainly born with it, and everyone is born with it. It's something that's absolutely very human. When you think about all of the things that humans have created in the world, including language, is what we spoke about. But it's how do you exercise that? And I think the critical thing is, do people practice? Do they do things that help them to build the strength of their creativity and the versatility of their creativity? And that's just practice. It's just about exercising that muscle and knowing some of the techniques that help you to exercise that muscle. So if creativity is about doing something that's new or different, how do you get to something that's new or different? That's the really difficult thing. But actually, it isn't difficult. There are several things that creative people, or people that others see as creative, do regularly and naturally. And so as long as you do those same things, you can be just as creative as Einstein or anyone else. It isn't that difficult, really. It's just knowing those little techniques.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you say that obviously what you do with Permission to Play gives people the mindset and the confidence to be creative. And so that that's you think that's what people need. It's
absolutely. I mean, the mindset is probably at the heart of it. Is if you've got the right mindset, which is the ability to be happy if things go wrong. At the end of the day, being creative is just trying stuff. So it probably will go wrong. Everything goes wrong. Let's just try it and see what goes right and how you can improve on that. It's also being willing to think about things in a non-black and white fashion. So it's fine for things to be contradictory or not absolutely defined or anything else, and being vague. So it's absolutely fine to think about things and explore things in that way. So it's this ability to be happy with vagueness, if you like, in life, and being happy to fail, that gives you the confidence then to go out and try some of the things and try some of the techniques that give you that spark those new ideas, that develop those things. So
yeah, I mean, just probably the last question really, but just in terms of going into a creative a corporate environment as a creative person, have you come across, I mean, have you had to sort of deal with corporates that really don't get it, or that find it difficult to let go in a creative way?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I find within corporate environments, if you like, is actually generally the leaders, so whether it's the CEOs or the board, do get it. They feel people need to be more creative. And in fact, if you look at recent research, the most in-demand skill or soft skill now for anyone, any recruitment in a professional capacity. The most important soft skill is, in fact, creativity. And at Davos, they always call creativity, always say that creativity is one of the top 3 most in-demand skills for industry and for business as a whole. So I think the senior level, they absolutely get it. I think it's those it's those people in the middle who probably are more concerned about doing things wrong, being seen in the wrong way or anything else like that, that need that courage, that need that permission to say, no, we want you to think, we want you to try things. We know not everything will go right, but if you do it in the right way, we'll support you. So it is about giving those people that confidence and giving them the skill sets, to go off and to do that. I mean, Steve Jobs famously said, creativity is just about connecting dots. It's just about connecting things. And that harps back to what a lot of the psychologists and researchers, certainly in the last century, have said. It is, creativity is all just about making these connections. So a lot of the stuff that we do is about giving them ways of making those new and unusual connections that give them something that actually could be quite a new and different way of answering, whatever problem that they're facing. One of the ones I find that they, surprises them the most is what we do is we get them to turn to. So one of the things we say is one of the skills you need to adopt is to be able to beg, borrow, and steal. So artists are always stealing ideas from each other. Well, why not do that in anything that you're producing? So go and steal ideas from how anything is produced in other industries, in other markets, or in other ways. But one of the places that's brilliant for actually borrowing ideas from is nature. And there's a site called asknature.org where you can go and you can have a look at how nature has answered a lot of the problems that we face. And let's be realistic, there probably isn't a problem that we face that nature hasn't already answered.
Absolutely.
And it's a great source of ways that nature tackles problems, from communication to making transport systems work, to designing color schemes and other things like that. It's a great website to go on and have a play around with. Some of it gets quite scientific, so depending on your background, it might get a bit too in depth, but you don't have to go into all of that depth. It's just getting the some of the examples that are there, and using those for inspiration.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is, I mean, and nature is something certainly during the lockdown that a lot of people have come to appreciate more, especially at a time with the climate crisis and there's all that sort of going on at the moment as well. And I think people do need to turn to nature more and see that actually we are part of that bigger structure. We should be looking to look after ourselves within nature.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that we are part of the structure then brings another thing, which is called system thinking, where you do look at yourself or look at whatever problem you're trying to face as part of this system and how the system overall works. So quite often, instead of trying to deal with one specific issue, what we'll do is we'll get people to think about, well, how does the system as a whole work, and if we change one little thing, how does it change the whole system itself? We use the example of Yellowstone National Park and the introduction of wolves back into the park, and how that, and hunters, and how the interaction between hunters, wolves, and wildlife changes then the rivers in the park and erosion within the park. So you start making those connections and those loops and that whole system thinking process that really then paints a much broader picture, and quite some amazing things can happen by increasing hunting or decreasing hunting or changing one behavior or another.
Fascinating. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Kevin. That's been absolutely amazing. It's tell us where people can get in touch with you and how they can find out more about what you're doing and the things we've been talking about today.
So the best thing is probably just to go to the website, which is PermissionToPlay, all one word, permissiontoplay.co. And on there, there certainly is the blog with all of the articles, the playbook people can download to try some of the techniques, and certainly contact me on there as well if you'd like.
Fabulous. Thank you, Kevin Mann from Permission to Play.
Thank you, Jackie. It's been a pleasure.